Good evening, everyone. So first of all, I want to tell you my personal story. I was not always a rabbi. I used to also be a college student. And as a college student, I was interested in environment, in protecting the endangered species, in global warming. And one time in our one of our college classes, they showed us how chickens were raised at a farm. And it hurt me a lot when I saw how inhumane the conditions are, how cruel it seemingly, and how these chickens are sort of like our slaves, that they are being raised in cramped conditions. They're being fed unhealthy food and being slaughtered very quickly soon after they're born. And it made me, you can say, nauseous. And I said to myself, you know what? As a sign of compassion and solidarity towards chickens, I will not eat meat anymore. And I decided I'm not gonna eat not meat and not chicken. And at that time, I used to eat at a college cafeteria, so it was a little bit hard to choose from the menu only things that don't have meat and chicken. But thank God I was able to do it. And for 3 months, I was vegetarian. And then, as I started learning more about Judaism, I said to myself, you know what? The way they raised and slaughtered chickens on that farm that they showed us, that's not how it used to be. When I used to live in Uzbekistan, former Soviet Union, my grandmother had chickens in her backyard, and they were healthy, good-looking chickens, and they enjoyed their worms and delicious food that we would throw them, and they played and they fought and they had babies, and eventually we ate them. But the conditions that they were subjected to were much, much better than the conditions that these farm-raised chickens lived in. And then as I learned more about Judaism, I realized that the way they slaughter chickens on a commercial farm or slaughterhouse is very different than traditional Jewish slaughter, where each chicken is taken by hand. One person is holding it, the other person checks the knife, makes sure the knife is sharp, razor sharp, and even more than razor. It has to be perfectly smooth, not to nick animal's neck. And the animal doesn't even feel. The animal lays there peacefully, and it doesn't even know that it was cut. So sharp is the knife. If a person, God forbid, would cut himself with such a knife, it would be even less painful than a paper cut. Person would not even notice that he got cut. And thinking about it, I said, you know what? I do disagree how chickens are raised in modern day America, and how the way they're slaughtered, whether it is by electrocution or mass killing. But traditional way of raising chickens or animals, allowing cows to pasture naturally, and allowing chickens to roam freely, and then slaughtering them in a painless way, is not so bad. So I said, you know, a good stepping stone. And I said, you know what? For 3 months now, I kept vegetarian diet. I did not eat meat and chicken. And you know what? Now I'm going to make a small change, a good change. Also, I will not eat commercial raised and slaughtered chickens. Instead, I will eat kosher slaughtered chickens. This way, I will at least make sure that these chickens were raised and slaughtered in a more humane way. And in fact, now there are some farms that do two things. Number one, they raise chickens in a again more humane way. They allow them to roam freely, and they feed them organic diet. They do not give them processed food of who knows what goes in there, and they also slaughter them in a kosher way. So this way, they're being raised humanely, and they're being slaughtered painlessly. So now we ask ourselves, why do people become vegetarian? In my case, I became vegetarian when I saw the terrible conditions of chickens on a farm. I felt bad for them. And as a sign of my pain, I did not eat chicken and meat for 3 months. But then I realized that there are better ways of raising chickens. And in fact, recently, when my children were young, I decided to show them real life. And in our backyard, we had a few chickens, and we raised them from eggs, and they hatched, and we took care of them, and we fed them and took care of them and cleaned them. And eventually, when they grew up, I taught my children also how to slaughter them the correct way, how to clean the feathers and innards, and how to process the meat, to extract the blood, and to ultimately cook them and eat them. And the whole neighborhood enjoyed, and I'm sure the chickens also enjoyed the delicious food we gave them and the care we provided them with. So I can attest that the original way, the proper way to take care of all your domesticated animals is humane, and the opposite, it allows more animals to be born, more chickens to be born. Imagine if no one eats chickens, then chickens may become endangered species. If nobody eats cows, cows may become endangered species because no one cares about them. However, now, because people are interested in chickens and cows and sheep and goats, they take care of them and raise them. This way, there are billions and billions of chickens in the world. There are millions of cows and sheep and goats. So actually, by using animals for human needs, we make sure that these animals survive forever. So that's one reason why a person might decide to become a vegetarian, because he feels bad for animals. In such a case, he can raise his own animals humanely, or he can choose a farm, organic farm, free-range farm, that treats animals better. Now, some people decide to become vegetarians for a different reason. A person might decide that meat is not healthy. Whether that is true or not, let's not discuss it. There are different opinions. Some may say that meat is healthy. Some may say meat is not healthy. Some may say it depends how you raise the meat. Be it as it may, some people decide to become vegetarians because they're concerned about their own health. And they say, I heard that eating animal flesh, animal fat might be not healthy, and therefore I will choose to eat only vegetarian diet. Some will allow themselves to eat eggs, fish, drink milk. Some, because of health considerations, will not even drink milk and will not even eat seafood that feeds on the bottom of the ocean. They may say this is unhealthy. Now, what does Judaism say about these two reasons? Of course, Judaism will approve of the first reason. If animals are treated with cruelty, this is against God. This is against the Jewish Torah. Because we are commanded from the beginning, when man was created, the first man, Adam, was created. God told him, I'm putting you in the Garden of Eden for you to work it and guard it. And the commentators say, what does it mean to guard it? To make sure that there is no unnecessary waste, and to make sure that all species of plants and animals are preserved, to make sure that the world runs smoothly, that no element in nature takes advantage of another element. And further in Torah, if we analyze the commandments that God gave his people, we will find that, for example, we have a commandment that we're not allowed to cook meat in milk. And the Torah expresses it by saying, don't cook a baby animal in its mother's milk. And some commentators say, this teaches us not to be cruel to animals. Imagine, you take a lamb, you take a calf, and you slaughter it. And okay, fine, you slaughter it, you want to eat it. But don't be so cruel as to take his own mother's milk that was designated for his growth. He was supposed to eat it. And you're taking away his food, you're slaughtering him, and you are cooking his flesh in its own mother's milk. The Torah says, I allow you to eat flesh, I allow you to kill the animal, but don't do unnecessary cruelty. And so the Jewish people are not allowed to eat meat cooked in milk. And one of the explanations is because of kindness. We don't want to be cruel to animals. Another example of our compassion for animals, the Torah says, you're not allowed to plow with an ox and a donkey together. Now, what's wrong with plowing with an ox and a donkey together? The commentators say that an ox and a donkey have different natures. An ox regurgitates its food and chews it again and then swallows it. The donkey, like most animals and like people, we chew it once, we swallow it, and that's it. Now imagine if an ox and a donkey are in the same yoke, and they're pulling the same plow. And as they're working throughout the day, the donkey sees that the ox is chewing. The donkey doesn't know that the ox is chewing the breakfast. And the donkey thinks, oh, the ox found some food and is enjoying while I'm hungry. And the donkey might feel bad. Therefore, the commentators say, God says, do not put two animals of two different natures together, because in this case, one animal will be hurt by seeing the other animal chewing while he is hungry. Or don't put a stronger animal with a weaker animal. The weaker animal will suffer, not being able to do as much work as the stronger animal, and so on. Another example of kindness that we have to show to animals is the Torah says, if you walk on your way and you happen to see a nest, and on the nest there is a mother with baby chicks or eggs, and the mother is sitting on top of the eggs or the chicks, you're not allowed to take the eggs or the baby chicks from under the mother. You have to first shoo the mother bird away, and only then you can take the chicks or the baby birds. This again is a sign of compassion that we have to have for a mother bird. While the mother is taking care of its young, don't cruelly take its babies or eggs from under its belly. First, chase it away. Let it not be involved in its motherly duties. Or perhaps let it not see how you take away its babies. Another example of kindness we have to show to animals is Jewish law states that if you slaughter an animal or a bird, you're not allowed to allow another animal or bird to view it. That means that if you have 2 chickens to slaughter, you take the first chicken, you have to make sure that you stand in such a way that the second chicken doesn't see you, how you are killing it. Therefore, put a partition and stand behind. Similarly, a cow or sheep, take one at a time, lead it to a different room or behind the partition, and only then slaughter it. One animal should not see and be pained by its comrade, its friend being slaughtered. And one more example. I'm listing so many examples because they're so interesting and wonderful. And from there we can see how careful we have to be when we treat any living being. And our sages say, when you learn how careful you have to be with the feelings of animals, it should remind you that how much more careful you should be with feelings of people. So another law in Torah says that if you are hungry and you know that your animal is hungry as well, who should eat first? Should you take a bite and then feed your animals? Or should you feed your animals? And the Torah says you have to feed your animals first, and only then you're allowed to eat yourself. That means you come home after work hungry and you have domesticated animals, whether chickens, cows, sheep, or even a dog. You have to feed them first, and only then you're allowed to sit by a table and eat yourself. Why? Because we say that a domesticated animal puts its trust in its owner. The animal cannot feed itself. A wild animal, on the other hand, can hunt or can travel and eat its own food. A domesticated animal, because you keep it in its enclosure, it's not free to take care of itself, and therefore you become responsible for its well-being. And therefore, you have to put its needs before your own needs. And the final example for today from the Jewish law is we're not allowed to cause pain to an animal even while slaughtering it, which means we cannot just take a hammer and hit an animal on the head. We cannot electrocute an animal. We cannot just take an axe and chop off its head, because all these things will cause pain to an animal, whether prolonged pain or temporary pain. Even if it's quick pain, it's forbidden. Rather, what do we have to do? We have to sharpen a knife. It has to be sharp and smooth. How smooth? We put our nail on it and we pass it over the knife. and it has to be more smooth than your mirror, more smooth than glass, so that your finger will not feel anything, not a nick, and not even any for example, you take your finger and you run it over your own skin, you will feel the fingerprints. Even such a small indentation is not allowed. Now, I invite you to take any of your kitchen knives and do this experiment. Run your fingernail on the blade of the sharpest knife that you have in the kitchen, not serrated, plain blade, and you will find that your kitchen knives are not kosher for slaughter. The best kitchen knife will be disqualified because it's not smooth and it's not sharp enough. And some people, the way they test whether the knife is sharp enough, they take a hair, a strand of hair, and they cut it with a knife. And the knife is supposed to be able to cut the strand of hair. Again, try it with any knife or razor at home. Not going to happen. But the knife that you slaughter an animal has to be so sharp and so smooth. Again, so that the animal will not feel anything. It will cut its skin and flesh and veins and arteries quickly, painlessly. The animal will lose blood and it will die just because blood does not go to the brain, as if the animal will fall asleep without ever realizing that it was killed. Now, some people say, yes, but when you slaughter a chicken, even if you chop off its head, afterwards it's running around. What's going on? And the answer is that once the head is not there, it's only the body that's moving. The head doesn't feel anything. And the fact is, the head is not on the body. So scientifically, biologically, it's a muscle reflex that is still operating, but the animal is not feeling any pain. The same thing you will find by animals. After you slaughter an animal, the blood supply stops to the brain. The blood pressure in the brain drops. The animal falls asleep and dies right away, does not feel any pain, but the body is still convulsing. But it's only the body. There's no pain transmitted to the brain anymore. And in fact, one time we went fishing with my father, and after we caught the fish, we cut it open, we took out its innards, and we fried the fish. As we were eating the fish, I noticed that the heart of the fish is still beating on the board. And I called my father, look, the heart is still beating. How's it possible? We already ate the fish. And he told me, because the heart has a muscle that works automatically by reflex. And even if you take it out of the fish, the heart will still pump. So just because the animal still moves after slaughter does not mean that the animal is alive. Okay, now, this is the reason number one. We worry about cruelty to animals. We worry about unnecessary pain to animals. And Judaism says, yes, that is correct. We're not allowed to cause pain to animals. In fact, Judaism forbids hunting for pleasure. We're only allowed to hunt if we're planning to use the animal for food or for medicine or for clothing, but just for fun, for sport, it is strictly forbidden to cause pain to animals or to kill animals. And therefore, if somebody wants to become a vegetarian as a sign of his rebellion against cruel treatment of animals, that is a permitted and a good reason to be a vegetarian. Now, what about the second reason? Health concerns. Can a person who is worried that meat is unhealthy, or whose doctor said stay away from animal fat and animal protein, is he allowed to be a vegetarian? And here Judaism again says yes. Human health is above all. Human life is above all. Therefore, even though Jewish people eat meat and fish and chicken on Shabbat, on Sabbath, and on holidays, on Yom Tov, it is considered proper to enjoy a good meal with meat and chicken on a Sabbath or Yom Tov, on a holiday. However, if it's unhealthy for a particular person, he is not obligated to eat meat or chicken. Again, if a doctor advises a person to abstain from meat and chicken, such a person is allowed not to eat meat and chicken, even though it is good to enjoy meat and chicken on holidays. So again, if a person becomes vegetarian because of health concerns, that is permitted. There is a third reason why a person might become a vegetarian. And that is because a person might say, who gave me, a human being, the right to control, to enslave, to slaughter animals? Who made me better than animals? Who said that people are intrinsically higher than animals? Perhaps we were all created equal, and therefore I'm not allowed to take anyone's life, not human life and not animal life. Such people will become vegetarians because of ideological or philosophical considerations. What does Judaism say about this reason? And this reason goes against Torah, against Bible, against Judaism. Why? Because we say, if we read in the Bible, if we read in the instructions that God wrote in Torah, that a human being is allowed to eat animals, that will be a sign for us that God, who created the whole world, who created people, who created animals, who created morality, he allowed people to use animals for their needs. Yes, we're not allowed to hurt animals. We're not allowed to destroy animals. But as long as we do it humanely, painlessly, God gives us permission to eat animals or to use them for our needs. So somebody who comes along and says, I am more humane than God, someone who comes along and says, I am more moral than God, someone who comes along and says, I think I know better than God, we will automatically disqualify his opinion. Why? Because how can he know better than God? How can he be more humane, more moral than God? If you assume that there is no God, God forbid, if you assume that there is no spiritual world and that we are all animals, then according to their philosophy, yes, who gave them the right to eat animals? Who gave them the right to wear wool or leather? Who gave them the right to use animals for work, like riding on an animal or plowing with an animal? That's true. If there is no God, God forbid, then they may be right. Although then you might have other people arguing, if there is no God and we are all a result of an accident, we all were came about by chance, then why not? We're all alive only for a brief moment of eternity anyway. So who cares whether we are cruel? Who cares if we kill others? There is no judgment, there is no judge, there is no right, and there is no wrong. Why should I be kind? Why should I care for others? Why shouldn't I kill and steal and rape and rob? Who is to say that this is wrong? So a person who takes it as a given that there is no God, he really shoots himself in the foot, because how can he trust his own intellect? How can he say that he's any better than another human being? And if another human being comes along and says, I think it is moral to kill animals, and not only that, I think it is moral to kill people, how can he say that he knows better than the other human being? Who is he? If everyone is created equal, then every human being has equal opportunity to think and equal opportunity to make decisions. And then we enter anarchy, and then everyone can do whatever is right in his eyes. And some people live their life like that. So some people say yes. But for the benefit of society, let's make rules, let's make laws. I'm not going to kill you, you don't kill me. I'm not going to rob from you, you don't rob me. So these are artificial laws. And if another society comes along and changes them, let it be. So you might have a society that will say, we're not allowed to kill people as long as they are productive members of society. But if they're sick or elderly or crippled, we're allowed to kill them. And we have seen such societies in Greece, in Rome, and in just recent history, Nazi Germany. So we have to be very careful that when we decide what is moral, when we decide what is right and wrong, we might be digging our own grave, because someone else will come along and decide that he thinks that Jews should not exist, that gypsies have no right to exist, that homosexuals have no right to exist, that elders have no right to exist, that patients with terminal illnesses have no right to exist. And perhaps when the same philosopher who now idealizes that we're not allowed to kill animals, he might be the victim of the next philosopher who will idealize that elders should not exist. And when our philosopher becomes 70, 80 years old, he will be mercilessly slaughtered by the next philosopher who will say, only young and healthy have the right to exist. So let's put it aside. And if we accept as a given that there is God, after all, we are interested in the Jewish view on vegetarianism. If there is God, he created the world, he created people and animals. And not only that, he gave us instructions in the Bible, in the Jewish Torah, how he expects us to behave. And in it, surprisingly, he told us that we're allowed to eat animals. And that makes us comfortable that when we take a chicken that we cared for, we take a lamb or calf and we slaughter it and we cook it, we can enjoy, we can eat delicious meat. And we don't have to think, perhaps we are going against the morals of the universe. Perhaps we're being cruel. As long as we raised it in a humane way, as long as we slaughtered it in a humane way, we are allowed to eat it. Now, how do we know that in the Bible we are allowed to eat meat? And this we know by learning the story of Genesis and Noah. When God created the first man, he told him, from all herbage of the earth you may eat, the fruits of every tree you may take, but you may not slaughter an animal. From here we see that the first man, Adam Harishon, was vegetarian. First people, until the times of the great flood, were not allowed to eat animals. Now, some commentators say that they were not allowed to kill an animal for food. But if an animal died by accident of old age, or one animal was killed by another animal, a human being at that time was allowed to eat it. So this was a limited vegetarianism. Adam was not allowed to kill animals for food, but he was allowed to eat flesh of animal that died by itself. However, after the great flood, Mabul, Noah was given a new set of laws. And God tells him, just like all the herbage of the earth, I give you animals to eat. From the time of Noah, people were given explicit permission to slaughter animals for food. Later in Torah, we hear of many stories how people actually ate. When 3 guests came to Abraham, he fed them a cow. And it says he slaughtered it and he fed them cow and butter. So they used animal products, butter and milk, and they used the meat. Elsewhere in the Torah, for example, it says, speaks about honey, even though it comes from bees. And you might say, why should you enslave bees, that they should work so hard to produce honey and you will steal it from them? The Torah says that people are allowed to eat honey, and we're allowed to raise bees for that purpose. And even though they're working hard, we're allowed to eat honey. And then on many other occasions, we see that people used animals for work. They used animals for leather and for wool. We used animals to take their milk. We used animals for riding, as well as eating their flesh. So, therefore, we see clearly in the Bible that people are allowed to eat animals. Now, we see, on the other hand, that the first man, and for 10 generations after him, people did not eat animals. Why? Our sages say because before the flood, people were on a higher spiritual level. And not only people, even animals were on a higher spiritual level. And therefore, it is true what the vegetarians say now, that people in those times did not have the right to kill animals, because animals at that time were more spiritual. In fact, it could be that they even had possessed greater intellect, and therefore it was not proper for people to kill animals. However, after the flood, the spiritual status of people decreased and the spiritual status of animals decreased. As such, permission was given for people to slaughter animals, because now they are no longer as intellectual, they're no longer as spiritual, and it is permitted. However, you may ask, yes, we're allowed to eat animals, but is it advisable? And here we are surprised to find out that in many Jewish sources, it is not advisable to eat meat. In fact, it is stated by some rabbis that a person who is not involved in spiritual pursuits should not eat meat, because eating animals will only bring him down. Since animals are on a lower level than we are, eating their flesh may spiritually drag us down, may endow us with their character traits. And by the way, that is why Torah says that a Jew is not supposed to eat animals that hunt, like tigers, lions, and the other animals and birds of prey. Why? Because we should not become like them. And therefore, these sages say that a person should only eat flesh if he learned Torah, if he studied the Bible, if he meditated, if he became a more spiritual person, then it is safe for him to eat animals. Alternatively, they say everyone may eat flesh, may eat meat on holidays and on Sabbath, on Yom Tov and on Shabbat. Why? Because these days are more spiritual, and the person who eats meat on those days, he fulfills a commandment to enjoy holidays and to enjoy the Sabbath. And therefore, it will not be harmful for him spiritually if he eats meat. But for a regular person on a weekday, it is unadvisable to eat meat. So, in conclusion, if we have to be concerned as to the reason why we want to become a vegetarian, if the reason for being vegetarian is because we oppose cruel treatment of animals, that is praiseworthy. If you want, you can raise animals yourself, and then you'll be able to eat their meat without feeling cruel. Or if you want to buy organic meat, or buy eggs or chickens that come from farms that allow them to roam freely, you may do so. Nevertheless, if you decide that you want to be a vegetarian because you want to show your disagreement with the way animals are treated in the Western world, you may do so. If you decide to become vegetarian for health reasons, you may do so. Whether it is your own idea, you heard that it's not healthy, or because your doctor says so, you may decide to become vegetarian. However, if the reason why a person wants to become vegetarian is because he feels it's immoral, it's unjust to kill animals for food, that is a wrong reason to become a vegetarian, because the Torah, the Bible tells us that it is perfectly moral, it is perfectly just to become a vegetarian, to eat animals. More than that, our sages say, if you refrain from eating animals for such a reason, you're actually hurting animals. Why? Because if animals were created with a purpose, just like people, every human being was created for a reason. Animals were created for a reason as well. If we assume that animals were created as helpmate for people, to help in our burdens, to provide us with milk, with leather, with wool, and with meat, then by using the animal for that purpose, you are actually helping the animal to fulfill its purpose. The animal to rise to a high level. Until now, it was just an animal. By eating its flesh, I'm making it part of a human being. I'm allowing this animal to be a partner with me in achieving greatness. Until now, it was just a cow grazing on a field. Now I eat it, I have strength. I can go and help another human being. I can make the world a better place. So the cow is now participating in human endeavor, in spiritual endeavor. It would not be able to do that if it was left in the field for the rest of its life. We have to remember that every animal ever born will die anyway. And therefore, what are we saving this animal from? From death? No, the animal would die anyway. We're just allowing this animal to live longer. Yes, but what about accomplishment? What will the animal accomplish by living longer? It will eat a few more pounds of grass. A tiger will kill a few more gazelles. By slaughtering it and eating it, or by using its milk, using its wool, using its hide, we are making the life of an animal meaningful. We are bringing meaning to an animal life. And therefore, by using the animal, by making the animal our partner in our work and in our life, in our diet, we are raising the animal from being an animal to being partner in human endeavor. And spiritually, we're actually benefiting the animal by using it. So again, to summarize, there are some reasons which would allow a person to be vegetarian, and there is a reason that it would be forbidden. Namely, for health reasons, it's permitted. To avoid cruelty to animals, it's permitted. But because you think that humans and animals are on the same level, that humans have no right to work the animals or to slaughter animals because it's immoral, that is a wrong reason. And as such, a person should reconsider his ideology, and he may start eating meat. Thank you for listening. Let's remember that we have to be kind and compassionate to all living beings. We learn from animals that we have to be kind to people. And even when we do use animals as pets or for food or shelter, we have to be as kind, as compassionate to them as possible. Thank you.